comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life Mark to pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government. I am back, and you are flying high with me, the Zigzag Man, out of Alameda, California, where we are experiencing a bit of the most beautiful weather in the entire world. We're right across the bay from San Francisco, and if the Mets didn't lose to the Giants yesterday, it would be a wonderful day in Ralphieville. As it is a wonderful day because I get to have a return guest who I've been dying to talk to about his recent experiences of becoming a professional baseball player. His name is Marquis Kidd, and welcome back, my friend.
Hey, it's great to be back, Ralph. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, I so much enjoyed talking to you last time. We had a bad background. Lenny Randle had called in, your mentor, and
yes.
We had three things going on at the same time. And but I was so happy to talk to you then, and I'm happy that you wanted to come back, and I wanted to have you, and it works out really well. Because, and it's only been a few months, maybe, but since then, you've had some remarkable experiences. You are now literally a professional ball player, which how many kids would give their teeth for, both teeth, the whole mouth when they're kids, to grow up and play ball and to be paid for playing a game that you love is a dream come true. So I'd like to congratulate you, and you tell me the story of how it all came about, especially how it all came about that you were a free agent, because given Lenny's evaluation, which means an awful lot to me, and obviously to people in Italy, how did you get bypassed in the draft and in the first place?
Well, I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And, everybody has their own opinions of things. I try and go out there and control what I can control, just to give my best effort and to put myself in the best position to succeed day in and day out and play the game 100% of my abilities and leave it out there. And I feel I do a pretty good job of that. And I can only control what I can control. And so, going through the draft, being unsigned, it was a little disappointing, but I kept my faith high and I just continued to work, and I knew that God has a plan, and that by staying right through what I was doing and what I was believing in, I knew something would come about. And so it was just a matter of when and where it would happen. And I was fortunate and blessed. Lenny came along, and he saw me and ended up opening a door for me and giving me an opportunity that I can never be more grateful to him towards. And I'm just trying to make the most of it these days. So I'm very thankful.
Well, you're a very modest person, but it just doesn't come. There's a lot of hard work. Must be hardest to train when you don't really know what you're training for. So
absolutely,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And tell me what that experience was like. What motivated you on a daily basis to keep going? You stayed in shape, and
absolutely.
for the opportunity. What was that like?
Mm-hmm.
What were those moments like?
So, training wise, I've always been one, to really have to work hard for what I get. I was never really, blessed with a rocket arm or, the ability to hit the ball 500 feet. So, I had to work towards, honing my skills and just, being able to put myself in the best position I could possibly be, both as a hitter and as an outfielder. And so, going through my regimen and working out, I just decided to kind of just turn it up a little bit. My dad and I, we kind of outlined a plan on what we were going to do as far as training goes. And, like you said, it's tough to prepare for something that you don't know what's coming. And so we just tried to cover, as much bases as we can, whether it was, throwing, through a small target or, going out and taking batting practice on the field, rigorously, myself hitting 2 times a day and working out 5 or 6 days a week, just putting my body, through as much shock that I possibly could so that it'd be ready for whatever came my way. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of preparing myself, for what has come. And, I'm excited for it and I can't wait.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, tell me about the signing. You're playing in Italy, am I correct?
Correct. So, I leave for Italy, next week. Next weekend I will be on a plane going out there and I'll be playing, professional ball out there. So, really excited, really looking forward to it, and I can't wait to see what's on the other side over there.
Oh, man, this is so cool. I can't tell you, how sports have become a business, all the things about PEDs in the last few years, all the societal things that ownership, forcing an unbalanced playing field, all the things that are bad in sports. Conversations like this really boost my being, my morale, my look at life. Makes me feel terrific, Marcus, that this came about for you. Have you ever been overseas?
I can't say I have. I'd say the closest thing.
There's a lot of water in between. You don't remember.
Yeah, I can't say I've left the States. I haven't left the States yet, but I've seen some pictures of Italy, and it looks beautiful over there. And I've heard, there's quite a few sites to check out over there, so I can't wait to kind of see what they have in store out there.
That's cool. What'd you major in college when you weren't playing baseball?
So when I was hitting the books, I was studying kinesiology.
Pardon me?
I was studying kinesiology, the study of how the body moves. Yeah.
Okay. If in the future, do you have any plans to using that, going into maybe being a trainer or?
Absolutely. So right now, prior to me, signing and playing professionally, I actually did do some training and instructing at a performance academy in Riverside, California, 108 Performance Academy. It's a baseball facility, and so there I'm actually the head hitting instructor there. So I get a chance to use a lot of biomechanics and anatomy and physiology, in what I do. So it's right up my alley, and I love it.
Wow. It's like a dream come true for you, sir.
It really is. And, it's just a blessing, being able to work around such a great staff and a great group of kids that I get to work and help see them develop. It really does the heart well. And I love it, and I plan on one day having a place like that of my own and doing something really great with my own
Marcus,
business.
before I forget, would you send me a link to that academy so I could put it up on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network website?
Absolutely. I will do that.
Beautiful. And tell me about the schedule in Italy. What level of ball would you say this compares to in terms of, would it be high A, compared to the minor league system?
So the level of competition from what I understand we'll be seeing is anywhere from high A to double A, with a little bit of like some triple A guys as well. So I mean it's a taste of everything out there.
Okay.
From what I've been told. Obviously I won't know until I get there, but I'm ready for whatever caliber of competition is out there.
Okay, now how do I get, the most important question I'm going to ask you is, how do I get a baseball cap from your team?
How do you get a baseball cap from my team? Well, that's simple. You just send your address down here, and I'll make sure it's taken care of.
Okay. I mean, I got to have a cap. I have a lot of caps, a lot of baseball caps, a lot of minor league caps, but this would automatically go to the top of my cap list, tied with the Mets.
I'll make sure I sign it for you. Dottie will sign it, especially for you, bro.
Now my life is complete. I thought it was when Tally came into my life. Back then I thought it was when my son Philip was born, but I didn't know. This is the tops. It's right up there anyway. Marcus, you are terrific. Any other call-outs? This is the kind of thing that I want my guests to feel very comfortable about, crediting people that help them along the way, what they have going. Anything you want to say off the top? I think, how about telling me about your dad? You were talking about him and what you got from him, and not just baseball, but life.
Absolutely. Well, first off, my dad, he's old school. He's very, he grew up, my grandfather was very tough on him, but very firm, and really taught him the value of discipline and work ethic. And so, I feel like he's really done a great job of passing those values down to me. He's my best friend, and we talk about everything. And I feel like every day I talk to him, I learn something new, because he always has something to teach. And I mean, the guy he's a big guy. He's 6'4". So I mean, his presence is always felt, but he's always there for me, and he's always caring, and he's always got my back. And I can't ask for a better father than that. And so, I mean, I love him. I love him tremendously, and I mean, I wouldn't trade him for the world. Okay.
Tell me about how Lenny came into your life.
So Lenny, funny story about Lenny was, I'm going to a game one day, and I get a call from a guy, and it's Lenny Randle. I don't know where he got my number from or what, but Lenny Randle gives me a call, and he mentions to me that he's doing a workout, and he had heard about me and wants me to come out and just give an evaluation. So I'm thinking to myself, well, all right, who's this Lenny Randle guy? Like, I look him up and I see who he is, and I see he's the guy who blew the ball down the third baseline. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I know who this is now. So I go out to this workout, and we have a great run at it. He tells me, he really sees some things that he likes, and he's really surprised that nobody has really taken notice of it, or that there's no scouts looking at you, et cetera, et cetera. And so he mentioned that he has some opportunities coming up, and that he would like me to be a part of them. And so he just like I said, opened the door for me, and just giving me an opportunity, and it's just been a complete blessing, and I can't thank him enough for it. I'm truly indebted to him.
How did he change some stuff as well? Did he tweak stuff in your game?
So, I mean, working with Lenny, I wouldn't necessarily say we tweaked anything. It was more so just making a couple of adjustments, with me throwing. He had noticed a couple of things that he wanted to see me do. So he showed me a couple of new things that I could do, to help me with my arm and, just to run a little more freer because, Lenny was a great base runner. So he was able to show me a couple of things on the base path that has really helped out as well.
Yeah, well, just to know, he looks for character first before he works anybody out or meets anybody. So that was the biggest recommendation from him, to me, to come on the show and to meet you. So, yeah, this is so cool. What's entailed with logistics in terms of getting ready to go over to Italy, passports?
Oh boy.
What's that about?
Being my first time, going overseas, I've had to go and get my passport, which has already been taken care of. And, we've booked flights and, getting all the itinerary together. So, now it's just a matter of just packing my bag this week and making sure I have everything before I head out there.
Right. Now, how long a season is it, and what's the weather going to be like? Because coming to the end of the season here, what's the weather in Italy going to be like between now and the completion of your season?
Yeah. So right now, from what I've researched, the weather right now, it's like mid-80s. It's actually pretty nice. There's a little humidity, so being prepared for that always, can be tedious, but it should be nice out. It should be nice out there. And as far as the length of the season goes, I believe it goes through the winter, so until November.
Okay, so maybe how many games did they tell you that?
They didn't mention how many games. Roughly, from what I read up on, it's about between 35 and 40 games.
Okay. Now, do they arrange to have you stay with a host family, or a translator involved? What does that entail?
Right. So when we get there, I should be meeting with a couple of people who take care of things like that as far as the translator goes. So I can't give specific information about that right now, but I do know that I will be staying in a hotel for a couple weeks while they're working out the details with the host family. But I may end up just living on my own. Yeah, I may just end up living on my own out there.
Okay. And do you speak Italian, just out of curiosity at all?
You know what, Ralph? I do not speak Italian yet, but I did take Spanish for quite a bit in high school and college, and I've heard that that transition isn't too bad, so it shouldn't be too difficult to learn.
You're speaking to a guy who got 19 in Spanish at Newtown High School on his report card, and 65 was passing. So it was difficult. It depends who it is. It was language. First language is very difficult for me. This English thing, I'm getting that down, let alone another one. So you're to be commended for, Spanish is very close. There's a lot of similarities to Italian, and there are certain things that, no need for words.
I agree.
All right. Marcus, you're terrific. You're going to keep us posted, I hope, and keep coming back on the show and let us know how the season is going. And you got fans at Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, really and truthfully.
I appreciate you, Ralph. Real quick before I go, I just want to give a quick shout out there, Ralph. To all my coaches, all my family, all my friends who's been with me on this roller coaster ride so far. I just want to say thank you. I love you, and we ain't done yet. So.
All right, that's beautiful. Keep it going. Keep it going. All I'm going to say to you and everybody else in ending this, I'm just going to say keep on keeping on. That's the best thing I can say. I'm proud of you, Marcus. I'm proud to know you.
Appreciate you, Ralph. Thank you for having me once again.
All right, man. Talk soon. Bye,
All
everybody.
right,
Catch you next time. I am back, and you are flying high with me, the Zigzag Man, over the zone from Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco in the northern part of the, probably the biggest state other than Texas in the Union. And it's a beautiful day. We're in the midst of one of the nicest weather streaks in the country, and I'm on the phone to somebody who is my guest for the first time on the zone. He is from Brooklyn, where they're having the worst weather streak in the country. Hot and humid, is it not? Marc Weiss from Brooklyn.
Yes, it is, and yes, it is. Hot and humid would probably be an understatement. I think it's now in the low 90s, and the sun's been down for hours.
Whoa. And
Whoa.
what that means in New York, when the humidity is up like that, it's torture. I mean, it really is. I was telling Mark off the air that I'm planning a trip back in the early part of September to last about 13, 14 days back there. And I'm looking forward to it. It's a reunion, a neighborhood reunion for me. I'm from Jackson Heights in Queens. And I've got all kinds of plans for a return to where I grew up and haven't been for very many years. And I want to see the changes. And what do you think changed most about the city of New York in the last, say, 12 years since I've been there?
Well, everyone tells me that the population exploded and has gotten bigger. I think the city's probably more diverse than when you left. That's for sure.
Okay.
I think that it's still a fun place. I mean, everyone comes here for a reason, right? It's just I think you're going to have a great time. You know, hopefully the Mets will supply some semblance of a pennant race for the wild card, the second wild card, when you come back, so you'll have some interest in that as well.
Absolutely.
But I'm not promising anything.
At this point, you really can't. They've been devastated. I think today, we're recording this on the 14th of July, on a Sunday, they, led by DeGrom's pitching, had a terrific game, and it was with Reyes's sparking it a little bit. So they needed that one very, very badly. And I think with Cespedes coming back, and now with Reyes and Cabrera coming back, they've got a shot. There's nobody in that wild card that really looks outstanding. You got Pittsburgh, you got St. Louis, you've got Miami. But like the Mets, they've been devastated a little bit with injuries. I know Stanton is out for the year, and Halladay is suffering injuries for St. Louis. So we'll see what happens. We were going to talk. We've been friends on Facebook now for a little bit, and I was drawn to the fact that you are a baseball board game, computer game, simulation game. You're kind of you get your solitaire, your enjoyment from that. You're in several leagues, and I wanted to talk about that. I myself love what I call dice baseball, my quote for myself. It's all an extension of dice baseball, which was a game we played as kids based on the probabilities of things happening. If you throw 6 and 6, it's going to be a home run. If you throw 1 and 1, it's going to be a home run. 2 and 3 would be a single. Still remember this from when I'm a kid. 3 and 3 would be a triple, that kind of thing. What did you play as a kid, and what got your interest?
Oh, well, I would have to say that it started with Mr. Richmond's game. Good old Stratomatic.
Right.
Started with the dice and the simple charts, and then it built into an obsession, and we kind of migrated from that to a game called Pursue the Pennant. I don't know if you ever played that one.
I didn't play it, but I saw it on the back of Baseball Digest many times. That it was advertised there, if I remember correctly. How does it differ from Stratomatic, which is based on, again, probabilities? They'd have cards that would depict a player's ability, both pitchers and hitters. And you'd roll the dice, and based on the card and the board game and the situation, you may have to roll it 2 or 3 times to get a play. But how would Pursue the Pennant be different from Stratomatic?
I think Stratomatic was so much more based on you had the 50% probability of the pitcher coming off the pitcher's card or coming off the hitter's card. And with Pursue, there was so many more special type of plays that could happen. And if a pitcher was dominant, there was more of a chance for it to come off his card than, say, the batter's card. So I think it kind of, in my mind, depicted baseball a little bit more realistic because the pitcher can really, as we know, carry the game or dominate the game, especially like you see in the postseason. So I think that's what drew us to that game. And then we also played Status Pro baseball. So we were just experimenting and trying to figure out which one we loved the most. And you couldn't go wrong, to be quite honest.
If I'm not mistaken, Status Pro was a Sports Illustrated Avalon game.
Yes, it was. You are 100% correct. And it was all about the SACs, action cards. It wasn't dice-driven. And you flip cards, and the problem, we always found it was a very streaky game because of the way the cards would align, whereas dice are dice. There's an infinite amount of rolls that could happen on the dice, whereas with those cards, there were only a certain amount of cards that could come up. And so I think we kind of lost our interest in that, although we tried it on the computer too.
Right. Speaking of those, they come in box sizes, and one of them was All-Star Baseball, which was incredibly realistic. It had a set of cards, All-Stars from all different eras. And there was no perfect game for me until they started doing it on the computer, where for me it was Tony La Russa. There was another game. Earl Weaver had a game.
That's
that
mine.
Was out. But my favorite was Tony La Russa. And that, I was telling one of my guests the other day, we were talking about it, Derek Bain, as a matter of fact, who wrote a book called Hardball Retrospective, based on numbers and based on probabilities and what have you. His interesting theory was he would follow a franchise and depict numbers on what if a player came up with a certain team, for instance, Babe Ruth, and his statistics were projected onto a team from WAR and other stats that he uses to determine how that player's effect, or those original players, no trades, no releases, nothing like that, the original player plays all through his career, how would that affect the franchise's success over the years? Excuse me. Very interesting concept, and we chatted. Turns out he was a game player too, and he played those same games as we did, and enjoyed them. I learned from those games. I learned as a kid, what players' skills were. One of my favorites as a kid, All-Star Baseball. you'd spin it, and you put the card in, and you could tell on the card that Babe Ruth, for instance, hit a lot of home runs, struck out a lot. And sure enough, the probabilities, if you hit the spinner, it's going to come out on a strikeout or a home run a high percentage of the time. Problem with that game, it didn't include pitching and the effect of the pitcher as much, if I could remember correctly. But when the computers came along, it gave us many, many options. The game I'm playing to this day is a game called Baseball Mogul. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, Mark.
I've heard of that one. I think it's a lot on the line with OOTP, building franchises and putting things together. I've seen those two.
Right.
I'm very much into baseball from DK Sports, Dave Koch Sports. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but
I've heard of it. Why don't you tell me about it, please?
It has become, my wife would agree, an addiction. I think I run 2 leagues. I play in 2 leagues, and the thing that I like about it so much is it's visual as well as the fact that it actually is true to statistics, which is obviously anyone who plays a baseball sim. If those statistics don't come out true in the end, it's bothersome because you don't feel like you really played the game. And it is true to statistics, but it also features where you can put great backdrops for different ballparks. And I was fortunate enough that I went on a trip last summer where I went through the Midwest, and I probably went to about 9 ballparks in about 10 days and took pictures of the stadiums, and they were incorporated this year in the release of the game as the backdrops. And I've also done custom baseball cards for a lot of the seasons, and they're included as well. So even though I'm not compensated for it, it just makes me feel really, really good that stuff is included. And when I play it, I just look at it, it's kind of a sense of pride. But I probably play a lot of games each week.
Now, how would you say it plays out as a visual as well? Do you lose something in the ability to keep statistics? Because there's only so much computer space on a game. So that I've found that a lot of games are really strong on one level or another. Mm-hmm. How does the visual effect of the game play out? You see little guys running around, or
you do. Well, not so much little guys, but more like little boxes. But what happens is, like, you'll look at the screen when you start, and all the stats are on the screen. All your play options are on the screen. And then the pitcher obviously starts everything. It's the only sport in the world where the ball starts in the hands of the defense. And the pitcher starts it off by choosing, is he going to pitch aggressively, or are you going to move your corners in? So you do all your setups. And then once you throw the pitch, then it moves over to the batting team, and that's when they get to choose, are they going to bunt for a hit? If there's runners on base, all the other options are available. And once they put their play in, that's when all the stats disappear from the screen. You get a full panoramic of the ballpark backdrop, and the play actually happens in what we call a slight video motion. So it's not like a EA Arts kind of baseball, which is all about the graphics and less about the stats. This is kind of the hybrid of it.
Yeah, you want a combination of both where it's at least interesting visually, but you, if you're like me, much more concerned about the stats and these guys playing to their abilities.
Yeah, for sure. Like I went to the All-Star gathering over at the Javits Center when the Mets hosted the All-Star game, and I was watching all these kids play with that home run derby, and they're hitting home runs with shortstops who had like 2 home runs the whole season, and I'm like, that's not statistically correct. I can't get into it.
Right.
Plus, I don't have the skill set to do it.
Yeah, you just it's boring. Let's put it that way. Can your game play solitaire? Like if you weren't in a league, could you set up a league with different teams like I do with my Baseball Mogul? What I do is I just make up a league of I'll tell you how I do it in a moment, but I'm curious about yours. If it will play on a solitaire basis where computer plays computer, all you do is hook in the lineup, because I think the skill shouldn't be based on can you push the button fast enough to hit a ball. It should be left in the players, the skills of the player to determine who wins the game.
But it's funny that you bring that up, because that's actually how the game seemed to have started out. Like, I probably got on board about 10 years ago, and I'm a big head-to-head player. I enjoy playing against another human being, because I find the psychology of matching up against another manager is really where a lot of the fun comes into play, especially in a league that I've been in, which is almost 10 years old. We kind of know each other's tendencies and what we're going to do. We've got one guy who if he's got a guy who's a 10 bunt, he's going to bunt every time unless you bring the corners in, and he'll steal bases as if like Ricky Henderson is in his lineup, even if he's not. And so that's a cool thing. That's why I like that. But when it came to the playing solitaire, that was what it was kind of based off of in the beginning. You can actually go into your preset manager and set up all your managerial tendencies, how players should be used. If the game's out of reach, do you take this pitcher out or these guys out and put in the bench, so to speak, and clear it? So you can actually set up your team to manage solitaire, because I do belong in another league where I play all my home games against somebody else's team and their manager file, and they play all the home games, their home games as well. I think typically in that league, there's at least somebody covering every team. Matter of fact, we're in the last week of the 1971 season. I really don't want to say how bad I did, but I did not do well. And it's probably because I did not set up my manager file for when the other folks play against it as well as some of the other guys do, because I'm a better head-to-head player.
Gotcha. You weren't thinking in terms of that. And, you have to know your priorities. So let me tell you about my league, the solitaire league that I set up. I'm a little older than you, so when I grew up, it was the teams I followed were in the 50s and the 60s. And here's how. So what I did, I took what I considered to be the best team of every franchise in the National League, and I added a bit of a caveat. So we'll start with the Pirates. I took the 60 Pirates. I took the 61 Reds. I know they weren't the best, but the 55 Dodgers were champions. They interested me. The 53 Dodgers were probably a better team.
I was going to say the 53 Dodgers pretty much had no weaknesses until they faced the Yankees.
Right. And at that point, the Yankees had that certain something going for them. In 53, it was Billy Martin, but it wasn't just 53, believe me. It was all those years. So I picked the 55 Dodgers, and then I picked the 54 Giants. And let's see, I picked the 67 or 67 Cardinals, I guess it was, and the 64 Cardinals, the 64 Phillies, the 69 Cubs, and the 58 Braves. I think that covers it. So my caveat is I wanted to see Willie play in L.A., in San Francisco as well. I picked the 62 Giants and the 63 Dodgers. So I have 10 teams. I play the Dodgers and I played the Giants in San Francisco, and I played the New York Giants in all the games, unless they're playing against each other. And I play the computer when through the schedule. And it keeps the stats for me, gives me a little newspaper with the headlines of other teams. I get box scores, probable pitchers, this, that, and the other thing. They tell you when a play. I put a little caveat in there, no injuries. The thing I hate most about sports is that when a season, a game, a franchise's history is really impacted by negative injuries. Can name
that sounds like the Mets of 2016.
Exactly. Sounds like. Wait a minute.
Is there a theme here?
You brought me back to reality a little bit. We're not supposed to be talking about reality. So, my Mets don't play in that league, so it makes it really easy. And I played the 62 season. a number of things that I can do. But this makes it interesting for me. I get to see Willie is in the prime of his career, in two of the primes of his career. He peaked twice. He was great in New York, and he was great in San Francisco. And I also get to manage my co-host's father's, it was Tom Haller. Tim Haller is my co-host on a different show on this network, and playing his dad catching for the Giants in '62 is pretty cool for me because through Timmy I've become very, very close with the Haller family and the Haller name, and as is, there's a lot of names that come up when I play guests that I've had on the show and what have you, or people who recently passed away, or a plan. It's very, very interesting. It keeps my mind nimble, and I could tell you the lineups of any of those teams, and without having to look down. And hey, when Frank Robinson comes up with the bases loaded for Cincinnati, I go, whoa. It's like I'm a kid again, and that's what it is. That's what all of this is to go back in time to when things were a little more a different world. Let's put it that way. What years did you grow up, Mark?
I would say my start with baseball was probably the first game that I ever went to. My grandparents took me to opening day in 1969. And, of course, I was probably more interested in all the vendors, and my grandfather let me know that wasn't acceptable. And eventually I became very interested in the game and keeping score of it, and they were Met games, obviously. We typically didn't go to many Yankee games. We did not head up to the Bronx. My grandfather was can we say Yankee hater, or would that be politically incorrect to say nowadays?
Sure, no, nothing is politically incorrect in today's day and age.
He was a Yankee hater.
Not on the Comfortably Zone radio network.
He was a Yankee hater. As a matter of fact, it was so strange because we used to always argue over who was the greatest center fielder of all time. And I would always say it starts with Willie Mays and then everyone else lines up afterward. And he swore it was Joe DiMaggio. Even though he was a Yankee hater, he still respected Joe DiMaggio in his game, and he said that Joe was so much better than Willie, and Willie was showboated a lot, and his hat would fly off. And I was like, but Willie did it for over 20 years at such a heightened level. And he never played in ballparks that were really conducive for him to be a great home run hitter. And not that DiMaggio did either. I mean, obviously Yankee Stadium with the True Death Valley wasn't either, but still, we used to argue about that all the time, always friendly arguments.
That brings to mind two things. First of all, you can't really cut DiMaggio. You have to cut DiMaggio's some slack because his career was a little short. Remember the World War interrupted that.
So Willie lost 2 years for Korea.
Right. No, DiMaggio was in World War. Williams went back to Korea as well.
But Willie Mays lost 2 years for Korea as well.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. But
so I always figured when I argued with my grandfather that DiMaggio lost 43, 44, and 45, and Willie lost 52 and 53. So it's kind of a wash.
Well, did your grandfather ever ask you who Willie Mays' hero was?
No.
It was Joe DiMaggio.
But you're going to tell me.
Yeah, it was
Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah.
So you just basically said I lost the argument.
that he wouldn't have told you that. You didn't really lose the argument because that's an argument that you can argue back and forth for a long time. Given Mays' longevity,
exactly.
Given everything, Willie was Willie. That's the only thing you can say. There was nobody that the Mick was the Mick too, for a short period of time. And Willie would tell you that Mickey was better. For those years in the 50s, Stengel described him as Cobb with power, Ty Cobb with power. That's how incredibly great he was when he first came up. He was injured, didn't rehab there wasn't the rehab that there is today available.
Absolutely not.
And he wasn't necessarily conscientious about his body in terms of abusing it, where Willie, on the other hand, was absolutely pure about taking care of himself and coming in the best of shape. He was luckier when it comes to injuries. The number one injury, ironically, that Mantle suffered early on in 1951 in the World Series is when Joe DiMaggio, he's playing right. Joe DiMaggio calls him off a fly ball, and he comes up short, stumbles on a drainage pipe, a drainage thing in Old Yankee Stadium, and really messes up his knee bad. So that got him. The irony of that, the man who hit that ball in the 51 World Series was Willie Mays.
That is correct. And what I heard about that play was that a lot of it came from Casey Stengel, because he told Mantle to take everything he could get, because at that point Joe D's range was limited, and he didn't think he could get to the gaps. And so that's why Mickey was really on his horse for that one, and then pulled off at the last second, and lo and behold, his cleat in that drainage ditch. Unbelievable. And that started all those injuries. But I've always felt that you're right, where at their peak, Mantle had those awesome peak years, but Willie's, peak just lasted so much longer, and his baseball acumen was through the roof, because I remember seeing him in an interview where he said that he used to call the pitches from center field and flash the signs to the catcher. I think it was back in like the late 60s, early 70s. I think that's when like Dick Dietz was behind the plate, or even Mr. Howler was behind the plate. He'd flash the signs from center field because he knew where he wanted to play the hitters, and then the catcher would flash it over to the pitcher. But I thought that was amazing. All puns intended.
I'll tell you another amazing stat, and we'll go, and I'll pick up for your grandfather a little bit. Never did Joe DiMaggio die for a ball, and never did his hat fall off. He was always he had these instincts where pitchers would say, they'd get the sign, they'd look up, they'd look back, and all of a sudden DiMaggio's in the spot where the ball is hit. So, there's two styles of play. DiMaggio had a certain grace about him. I call it the Ron Erster grace. It's an inside joke. If you've ever played street basketball, baseball, stickball, or anything in Jackson Heights, New York, you knew in the neighborhood who the Joe DiMaggio was. It was Ronnie Erster for us. I'm sure Joe DiMaggio would say, well, Ronnie Erster was at class, but I was Joe D. In any event, there was something about him, and he had the style, he had the ego, he wanted to be the greatest Yankee ever, and introduced as that, and he was a very complex human being, as was Ted Williams. And the last thing I'll say about those guys is that it came very close, because you mentioned the Yankee Stadium, that vast left field for a right-handed batter. They almost traded DiMaggio for Williams.
I heard that was one of those golf game over drinks afterward. Then they went to sleep that night, woke up in the morning, and said, let's not make that trade.
Right. One of them called it off. It was Tom Yawkey, and I don't know if it was who it was, McPhail. I think it was Larry McPhail with the Yankees.
I would say Mr. Yawkey made the right move, because at that point I think Teddy had another decade, and Joe was probably about 3 or 4 more years left, in his career.
Absolutely. And what can you say about Ted Williams, who 2 interruptions to his career, still hits over 500 home runs, 340 batting average, probably the greatest pure hitter that in our lifetime for sure, except for Barry Bonds.
Barry Bonds.
And then, you can take that whole PED thing and this, that, and the other thing. And I've gotten to the point where I can't compare players from my generation to this generation or that generation anymore. But you can compare players that played against each other. And PEDs, this, that, and the other thing, Barry Bonds was incredible. He was in an incredible groove for about 4 or 5 years there that I don't think anybody, he had Gretzky-like stats. They so far exceeded everybody in the league. Number of walks, this, that, and the other thing. He's got to go down as one of the greats. And in our time, in the last 25 years, a man who retired this past week, A-Rod, probably the greatest shortstop that either of us has ever seen in our lives. PED's personality, lies, deceits, notwithstanding, got to give the guy a lot of credit. He is what he is.
Well, as the sports talk hosts in New York City call him the lightning rod, because love him, hate him, there's no one who has any middle ground when it comes to the guy. And when you look back on that guy's career, you have to say to yourself, what would he have been without the PEDs? Whereas with Barry, we know what he would have been without the PEDs, because I would say more than the first 2/3 of his career were probably clean as a whistle, and he was still a first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind.
No question. Absolutely.
I think the PEDs turned him from a first ballot Hall of Famer to the Mount Rushmore of baseball.
Well,
I think that's all it did.
As far as we can tell now, Rodriguez had been changing. When you say PEDs, well, you take a little performance-enhancing drug. It changes the chemical makeup of your body. It just does. It's gonna make for change. But if 80% of the players are doing the same, what do you say? Somebody tells me the other day that there's a stat that Gagne had the most consecutive saves for a relief pitcher without
over 3 years.
Right, and then but you can't count Gagne on the list of guys because he did PEDs. Well,
right.
Wasn't he playing against guys doing PEDs? So why can't you count them? In other words, you can say you can't count Barry, but if pitchers were doing PEDs, why can't you? I
put Barry and Roger Clemens in the same class. They were first ballot Hall of Famers before PEDs came on the horizon, and this just took them to the Mount Rushmore of baseball. And because of that, I think that's why people hold it against them. You never hear anyone complaining about Brady Anderson taking PEDs and hitting 50 home runs and getting that huge contract, because
you do.
That was inconsequential.
No, you do care. You do hear people all the time. They use him as an example of somebody who could. But
right.
What you don't
But it doesn't bother them as much as Barry Bonds doing it.
I would say if Clemens did PEDs, and there's a pretty good chance he did, I would say circumstantial evidence without having and if I throw a name like Nolan Ryan out there, Nolan Ryan defies what a body should do and how a body should break down. Cologne, another guy, is 42, 43. Wouldn't surprise me if he's come up.
Well, he has come up.
He's come up positive before.
Yeah.
Certainly wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if the reason Kadire retired last year, and thank God that he did, it freed up money for Cespedes
to stay.
But if you don't leave that much money, a normal human being doesn't leave that much money on the table. Maybe a test came up. Maybe he was so beloved in baseball that they couldn't deal with another player like a Braun or whatever going through it. Say, hey, you want to retire? You can retire. We'll make you a deal.
But don't you think that Braun winds up in a worse class than the rest of these guys? Because not only did he do it, but he hung that poor guy out to dry and almost ruined his career.
Well, look what Clemens and the back of
I know.
Bonds put a guy had to go to jail to avoid testifying. You spend time in jail to avoid testifying, just to testify that it was him that put together this elaborate schedule for Barry to take these drugs, that he even denies knowing what cream was. Well, I rubbed it on me. I didn't know what it was. Don't you think that's just as bad? I think, of course, what Braun did was horrible. But it all starts at the top. Did what's his name? I can't even think of the commissioner who just
Bud Selig.
Bud Selig. Did he know what was going on? Did every trainer in every minor league, major league locker room know what was going on? Did every manager, coach in every major and minor league team know what was going on? Did the unions help put people off, put the P-testing off, warn guys when they were going to be tested, this, that, and the other thing? Well, they did, and they're equally, everybody in baseball, did reporters that knew there was something wrong not report things? Yeah, of course they did. Baseball is complicit. So they should all just say, well, we're going to start all over again. This is the way it was. And I think they're trying to do that now. Why does Cologne not come up? Maybe he has a better chemist. Maybe he's taken a better drug to cover it up. Who knows? But I do know this. It's prevalent, probably still is, and you got to start putting these people in the Hall of Fame or take away, if you're going to not put Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, what's the Hall of Fame like? Now, do I feel the same way about Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson? Not really, because there's that one rule that could contribute to taking baseball down the tubes more so than drugs, because obviously people don't care if these guys use PEDs. They want to see home runs. They want to see records broken. The fans don't really care about the purity, but they would care about the integrity of the game if it was messed with. You can't have a sport where
I was going to say, I think that the fans, especially the younger fans, don't really care about that. They like to see the long ball. There's no question about it. And after the strike season of '94, the long ball really rejuvenated the game. Matter of fact, the long ball always seems to fix the game. It seemed to fix the game after the 1919 Black Sox scandal, when Babe Ruth starts pounding balls out of ballparks at a record rate more than other teams combined, and it starts increasing the interest in the game. So I think the home run has always been the cure for the doldrums of baseball. There's no question about it. But what you have to say and what you have to do is draw a line in the sand and say, what are we going to do? The Hall of Fame isn't happy because there's going to be a whole generation of guys who are not going to be enshrined, and the Hall of Fame is still a business. And if they can't have these huge induction ceremonies like the one I went to 3 weeks ago for Mike Piazza, if there's going to be years where no one's going in because these folks are not going to vote for them, that's going to tarnish and hurt the Hall of Fame. I think you put these folks in based on their merit, and maybe you put something on their plaque that says that they were the best players during the acknowledged steroid or PED era. I think that's probably the only compromise I can think of. But you got to get them in.
Very well said. I have a question for you. You've experienced going up to Cooperstown for an inductment ceremony, and it's late. It's late in California. It's probably later in New York. I'm just guessing it's 3 hours later. So the old man's brain goes south a little bit the later it gets. But my question is, what is the experience like for you? Go up to what's Cooperstown like compared to New York City, of course, but what's the experience like? Do you go up by bus? Do you go up in a caravan with folks? Do you stay up there in a hotel, or is it? Give me the weekend experience.
Well, I have to say that it was one of the greatest experiences my crew of guys had. That we went up with about 6 guys. a lot of us knowing each other back from the days growing up in the neighborhood when we were kids. So we're talking about 30, 40 plus years. Don't really want to say that many years, but it's true.
You grew up in Brooklyn. What high school did you go to?
I went to South Shore High School in Canarsie.
Oh, that was probably it. Was it a newer high school after my time, or?
It opened up in 1970, and I believe it closed 5 years ago.
Ah, okay. Well, that's why, because I left in 1965. I left the city, and I didn't know about Canarsie having a new high school. You went there, and you met these guys, and you've been friends ever since.
Friends since maybe middle school, high school. A couple of friends like I played ball with after school. We knew each other. We know each other for a long, long time, and then of course we've added some folks along the way who are friends of friends, and all just baseball lovers. And we decided that since Mike Piazza's our guy, and we had to go up there for it. Soon as we heard that he was getting inducted, we tried to book a hotel as close as we could to Cooperstown. And for anyone who doesn't know Cooperstown, there aren't many hotel options, period, near Cooperstown in the first place. We found one in I think it was Johnstown, New York, and it was like 35 miles away. But going through the back roads, it probably took close to an hour to get from Cooperstown to there. So we drove up on a Saturday, 6 of us, and we stopped at the old Roscoe Diner on Route 17 for anyone who remembers the days of driving up to the Catskills, Route 17. We stopped there and then eventually hit Cooperstown in the morning. And we did the Hall of Fame, which is kind of a yearly ritual for us anyway, but this was the first time we've ever done induction weekend. And we didn't know what to expect. And the city had like almost 70,000 people in that tiny little village of Cooperstown running all over the place. And it was just phenomenal. They had a parade on Saturday for all the Hall of Famers who came back. Just a personal note, anytime I can be in the same town of Mr. Sandy Koufax, I'm ecstatic, and he was there, so that was just fantastic too. But it was just a great Saturday just being there and walking around and hitting the stores and going through the museum and seeing the parade. And then Sunday we got there early. We put our chairs out the night before on the induction lawn, and we were still about 2 football fields back from the stage. And there were people who were like 2 football fields behind us. They said it was the second largest induction weekend next to Cal Ripken Jr.'s. But it was, I can't say anything more about it. It was just fantastic. You got to do it once in your lifetime.
Yeah, the length of 2 football fields, not the width.
Yes.
The length.
The length. I took my camera.
Everybody's just with all their Mets gear on. You see some Dodger fans too? On Saturday, I wore a Piazza Dodger jersey, and on Sunday, I wore the Met one. Ah, very cool.
I decided to split the time.
Did you, you weren't a baseball fan before the Mets, obviously.
No.
Because your first game was 69. What did your grandfather do when the Giants and Dodgers left? Did he root for the Yankees? Did he finally go over to the Yankees? Or how did he handle it? Or was he just mad at baseball?
It was more the latter. He was definitely completely angry at baseball. My mom was probably one of the biggest Dodger fans in the world. I mean, her favorite player of all time was Jackie Robinson. Need I say any more? She would drag her girlfriends to Ebbets Field. She went to Thomas Jefferson High School, and she would drag them to day games, sometimes night games, to go see the Dodgers play because she loved her bums. My grandfather the same way, my grandmother the same way, and they just lost interest in baseball for that 4-year period. And when the Mets came, it was like a rebirth for them.
The Mets brought them back.
The Mets brought them back like hook, line, and sinker.
Nice. I floundered. I rooted for the Braves the first year.
Because they played the Yankees.
Oh yeah, that when I was 10 years old in '57, and they were leaving, and they weren't coming back, and I was a National League guy, and I couldn't. Turns out I was a Yankee worshiper. Yankee hater on some levels, but I had to worship these guys. They were so great, and for so long, and with such consistency, those dynasties were terrific. But I couldn't ever root for them, and it was very, very difficult for a kid to lose his team. And years later, I'm talking to a woman who I know, happens to be a psychologist, and I was explaining how, that was a loss. I'm still a little pissed that the Giants and Dodgers left in '57. I'm 10 years old. And she identifies, she says, that's a real loss. You're not just kidding about it. That's a life's loss to people. And you're one of the reasons I'm nuts like this in baseball. It's my way of mourning it. You looking back to days when I went with my grandfather to the Polo Grounds, and boom, all of a sudden they were gone, and we had to go to Yankee Stadium, which was no real punishment when you think of the great teams. Mm-hmm. But when your heart is wearing orange and black, and you got they're out in California, and they've got the SF on, but it's the 62. It's the same coaches and managers. The coaches and managers were the same guys on my boyhood team. The Al Darks managing, and the Whitey Lockmans coaching, and Jansen.
I think Davenport was coaching for a while there too. Jim Davenport.
Jim Davenport, but actually, when in '62 he was playing, he was the third baseman. But Whitey Lockman was one of my boyhood heroes, and he's coaching. As a matter of fact, the way things turn out in '62, Whitey Lockman holds up Matty Alou on the bases. Could have been the tying run. And Mays was quoted as saying, if it was me, I'd have run right through the stop sign and taken the plate.
Well, because he wouldn't have held up Mays, because he probably knew Willie would have made it.
Right, that's
little difference in speed between those two guys.
Matty Alou was fast.
He's quick
as well.
He was quick, definitely.
Yes, Matty Alou.
But Willie had that gear.
And that intensity, and he'd have found a way onto the plate. He'd have slid in a certain way. He'd have made it. There's no question. But again, that is 20/20 hindsight. And that ball hit by McCovey could have gone a foot or two in either direction, and we'd have been revisiting history in a different way.
Now I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Since you saw that, and that ball could foot either way, and Bobby Richardson doesn't catch it, and the Giants win the World Series in Game 7, do you think if the Giants win that World Series in '62, because think of all the second-place finishes they had for the rest of the decade, do you think that gets them over the hump, and then they go on a tear, and maybe they become like a National League dynasty, because they were always there every year?
Yeah.
Do you think, or do you think they just would have been a one-hit wonder?
I don't know if that one. There was so much competition. The Dodgers were so great. Milwaukee was still good. The Cardinals were great. Were good and in contention on a consistent basis. You had guys like Marichal, but you also had guys like Gibson and Koufax and Drysdale. It was just an incredible time in baseball. It was when Blatz were finally, after Jackie and other heroes that crossed the line that don't get as much respect maybe as they should for the ordeal that they went through. Sure, Jackie went through the hardest part, but when he came up in the minors, it was with Montreal, and they were pretty race neutral. They in those days, and even today, far ahead of their times. But players like Frank Robinson, when he came up, Veda Pinson and those guys, they had to play in minor leagues as did Jackie in spring training and all that he went through and more. You can't understate it. But you also have to say that guys like Frank Robinson went through a different kind of living hell. First of all, it was later and much more of a shock that stuff like that was still going on. The real shock is not only was it going on in the late 60s, it's going on today. Things really basically haven't changed all that much. But my
I think when it came to Frank and Veda, I remember hearing that they wanted to keep Pete Rose away from those two fellas because they thought that they were bad influences on Pete. And I'm sorry, but there's code words when you say stuff like that. And Frank was traded. Remember, he was an old 30.
Right, he was the youngest 30 you ever saw.
Yeah, he was an old 30. What did he do? Win the Triple Crown the next year and win like 5 pennants, 4 pennants and 2 World Championships in Baltimore. So he wasn't old, but I guess Cincinnati being, that close to Kentucky and being almost like a southern city even in the 60s, what you're talking about was still prevalent. And I think that I think that his strong-willed personality rubbed people the wrong way because people didn't know how to handle it and not accept him for the true competitor and how great he was. And it's funny because I think Pete might have been a worse influence on those guys if they played with him longer.
Well, I don't know if being a bad influence on Pete Rose in particular. Got to say about Pete Rose, probably along with Billy Martin, the biggest overachiever, talent-wise, that I've ever seen.
I could agree with that. A total competitor. I mean, Pete Rose, I think it goes without saying where if a team was up by 10 runs and in the game and they would just go through an at-bat to get the game over with, Pete would still battle in that at-bat, and that's how he got all those extra hits because he never knew how to quit.
Yeah.
And maybe in the long run, that dogged personality is really what hurt him in the long run.
Well,
but he sure was exciting to watch.
Exciting to watch him on the bench as the Giants manager down the road. And he was managing guys like Kuiper and Joe Morgan and Jack Clark and Willie McCovey. It was fun times. The Giants they left. I end up spending the majority of my adult life out in California. I was stationed out here in the Air Force, and I stayed. So the irony is I became a Met fan before I went off to the Air Force in '65 and had to follow the Mets religiously long distance all these years when it wasn't as easy as it is today where you pick up the internet, you pick up your tablet, and you could be watching any ball game anywhere at any time, and you get instant box scores and you get numbers in this. It was very difficult following the West Coast teams when they left New York in '57, especially for a kid who couldn't stay up late at night, all of those things. Anyway, the psychologist tells me that I have a good reason for being a little goofy. Is that my team left, it was like an early loss, and that's why I've been loyal to the Mets. And I figured they deserve it because teams that don't leave deserve the loyalty of the fans. But everybody handles it differently, and I know of a lot of guys that I grew up with. My friend the Bear was a lifelong Giant fan, and he followed him out here, and he ended up living out here, and he got to be around the team that he liked best. So,
well, didn't a lot of the Hollywood types follow the Dodgers all the way out to California? Like Danny Kaye and guys like that? Oh,
yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the songs that Danny Kaye does about the Giants with Miller, and I play that for Timmy, and it makes him glow that his dad is mentioned 3 or 4 times. His dad is instrumental in that. Hiller goes to Miller, Miller goes to Hiller, That's pretty cool. Danny Kaye.
But see, it all comes full circle for me because Danny Kaye was one of my grandfather's friends.
Was he really? Oh,
yes.
I'll tell you what. I watched Hans Christian Andersen in Radio City Music Hall when I was a little kid, and that was. It affected me. He was a storyteller. I ended up being a comedian, but just the charisma. And these stories, life stories about the little duckling and this. Tell me about his relationship with Danny Kaye. How did they get to know each other?
He actually was very, very good friends with Danny's brother, and Danny was younger than my grandfather. And he was always joking and entertaining and interrupting the older guys, and like they would try to like shoo him away and stuff like that. And they never thought that, they never understood his talent or thought that he was ever going to, be anything with that talent, but he worked it and he became so talented and so famous, and then they all wound up talking about him, but he was just their friend's little brother at one point.
And where did he grow up?
In Brooklyn.
Was he from Brooklyn too?
Yeah, I think because my grandfather was in the Bronx at the time, they might have met there, and then they all moved to Brooklyn and continued that type of friendship. It's my grandfather is now, may rest in peace, gone since 1986. He did get to see the Mets win in '86 before he passed away, which he really wanted to see that in the worst way possible. But so the stories are, sometimes they wane a little bit, but I always remember him talking about that and like saying, yeah, like we kind of abused him. He was a kid brother.
Wow.
Go figure.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's amazing what a terrific city we're from, and the folks that become successful coming out of the generation that your grandfather grew up with. It's amazing. Where'd your grandfather come? Was he from the old country originally?
Actually, my grandfather was the first generation of born here in America, so to speak, from our family. His father and mother came from the old country. They came from Eastern Europe, from Russia. My grandmother's parents were from Lithuania and Galicia and areas like that. It just seemed like it was like, as I joke with my kids, they have all of Eastern Europe from me and all of Western Europe from my wife.
Okay, cool. I'm actually half Russian and half Polish. Two Jewish families that end up coming to America, a Bruch's on America.
So were your parents the first gen? Did they come here, or were they born here?
Well, my mother was born here. My grandfather on my mother's side came here in the early 1900s from the pogroms, and my father escaped Poland and went to Belgium, learned to trade as a diamond dealer before World War II, came here to escape the Nazis when they were headed towards Belgium, and went in the army and became a citizen and got out of the army and met my mother, and instant romance. They got married, and I was one of the first baby boomers going, 1946. And
now, see, I think I qualify as the last year of the baby boomers. I'm 65. I'm 1965.
I think that is considered the last year. Absolutely.
I think I hit it. I think
Sorry,
I'm the last year.
We screwed it all up for you as much as we did, but times have never been worse. Can you imagine a country where the two people that we have to choose from are this much disliked for all the right reasons?
Doesn't it make you ask yourself this question? How could two people so dislike be in this position? How did that happen? What's going on?
Because
I think we know what's going on. At least definitely on one side we knew what happened because those emails came out.
Right. Well, I worry more about not the emails. It's not that. It's the stuff that was done that is still being done. It's like the fracking, the making a deal with Monsanto. Let's face it, we never had a president, even George Bush W., who was at war, wasn't at war the entire time of his administration. There's never been a moment when Obama, he had to take control at one time or another. He still drones. He still wiretaps. Things aren't much different between the Republicans and Democrats. I think
I think that's a great point, because how many of the establishment Republicans are supporting Hillary Clinton?
They're supporting her because she is a Republican. She's
well, she is establishment.
But there is no difference between Republican and Democrat. And I'll tell you something. They joke about it with Wasserman, the head of the Democratic Party, and they say, well, it was her, and the primary wasn't fixed, and Hillary didn't, it might have been fixed, but Hillary didn't know about it. I guarantee you there's nothing that goes on in the Democratic Committee, the Democratic National Committee, that Hillary Clinton and her sleazy husband, who walked up to the plane of the Attorney General to chat allegedly about their grandchildren, there's nothing that gets by these people. They are running.
Well, quid pro quo runs wild, and that's why I mean by she is the establishment. Both sides want the status quo to stay the same, obviously, because that means money in their pockets and nothing changes. They don't want anyone coming from the outside who isn't beholden to anybody else. They don't want anyone coming from the outside who's going to upset the apple cart. When push comes to shove, they just shuffle the deck chairs, and nothing ever changes, it seems like.
Stop it.
Except for us, though, because we seem to be the ones who pay for it.
Right. Stop the line, change the labels, and continue it on, and you're getting the same exact stuff. And we're the folks, I'm just sickened by it. I mean, I'm going to be 70 years old, and I am really tired of pulling that lever for the lesser of two evils. Even though the lesser is so much more or less than Trump, this, that, and the other thing, really isn't on some levels. Trump says things that but Hillary has done things. So
that's a good
less
point.
afraid of the words than I am of the actions.
When did you ever think in your lifetime you would see a Republican candidate who's further left on some issues than the Democratic candidate?
Geez. And
I don't think I ever would have seen it, thought I would see it.
No. And I got to tell you something. The Republicans are going to do something to call the thing off some way. They'll convince him to get out of there. He's about to be trumped in such a manner that they're going to bring the House and the Senate with them, and they're desperately afraid of that. It doesn't matter. A president really can't change things that much either way if the House and the Senate aren't for them. Bernie was a big hope. Bernie really was. Bernie was going to change things a lot, and I think he pushed the platform over to the left. How much she'll abide by that, I don't know. I do know that we, to make this country strong, have to eliminate the expression working poor from the vernacular of what goes on. You cannot have people who work 40 hours and can't raise their families. There's going to be a revolution when it comes to that. And I think
you're right. I think the biggest problem is you have
the political
candidates
thing
right now.
comes first. They try to do it in such a manner where they get somebody in there that wants to give a living wage. In the South, the minimum income is like $7 an hour in the South, and you wonder why we're being held back by Southern thinking. you can't expect people to have pride in themselves and in their environment if they're working hard and not getting enough money to live on. The middle class is being phased out, and I'm telling you, someday it's going to be a fiscal revolt. You try to do it politically, and they fixed the primaries. They just basically made it so Hillary Clinton was going to win.
Well, there was supposed to be a coronation in the first place, and because she's such a weak candidate, Bernie came out of nowhere. I mean, remember, Bernie wasn't even a Democrat until he decided that he wanted to run, and they just laughed it off and didn't think that he was going to win, just like they laughed off Barack Obama in 2008, and she was supposed to get a coronation then. And then what happened is the fact that she's such a weak candidate came out. She doesn't really stand for anything. She'll just say what she has to say because she wants to get elected, and these other folks can, challenge her on it, and then they win. The difference is this time they made sure that the challenger couldn't win. The last time it didn't happen. This time they made sure that it happened, and that's the sad part about it is, and I feel like he kind of let some people down because he had been talking all along about how the system is rigged. I'm winning all these primaries, and she's getting more delegates, and I think everyone connected to that. Whether you agreed with him or didn't agree with him, you felt he was truly an honest guy and he was telling the truth. And then when it came out that that's exactly what they did, he backed off. I thought that if he would have pressed it at the convention, he could have turned things around and actually maybe won the thing.
Well,
maybe I'm just crazy.
Trump put the fear of God in every Democrat, right? He's nuts. He's a lunatic. And it got to the point where he was saying things where Bernie had to come out and say, listen, he never did come out and say he's supporting her. He's basically, he's not going to go campaign for her. He's not going to raise money for her. It's a wink and a nod thing, but they were afraid. I think if Jill Stein would have gotten Bernie behind as her vice president with the Greens a long time ago, I think if Bernie knew for sure, I don't think he knew for sure they were screwing him this much. I don't think they knew for sure that
I think he felt it.
They were saying things
and I think
about
that was
his
his line.
religion or his lack of religion. I mean, that comes out. And tell me this: how could Wasserman not have, when all this shit came out, how could she not have been indicted for election fraud?
I agree. Well, I think the only reason why she wasn't indicted is because of the fact that I don't know how much the laws apply to a private entity like a political party. I think if it was election fraud in a general election, I think you can't get around it. There would be an indictment. But I think political parties can almost make their own rules. Look, they could change the rules right before the convention starts. Because remember, there was that movement where they were going to change the rules so that you could vote your conscience and not vote for Trump. And then someone kind of pressed that down and didn't let that happen. But I think the parties can decide what they want to do because they are private entities in a sense. But in Trump's case, the Republicans made Trump because 17 of them were banging heads against each other, and they just let him do his thing, and they didn't take him seriously, and he just pegged them off one by one.
Yeah, and I wonder why people are more worried about Trump than they were about Cruz. Cruz is crazier than Trump will ever be.
Well, I think they're more worried about Trump because Trump has more of a populist appeal, and so they don't know how to really fight against the populist appeal because it's not something you typically see from the Republican side. Whereas when you're talking about Cruz, you take the old playbook out about how to fight against, conservatives and Southerners and stuff like that, and they know how to beat that. That's pretty standard for them, and especially a guy like him because he's not charismatic, and I don't really see that he accomplished a heck of a lot.
Well, I only have one wish. I wish that one day they should make a national day when any politician who stands up and makes a speech, like Hillary, for instance, she says the things that are right about her instead of what's wrong about Trump. Same thing with Trump. Trump makes a speech. He says here's the things I'm going to do and how I'm going to do them, rather than say all the things that are wrong about Hillary. So when we ever get back to the point where people are talking about their own platforms, their own concerns, their own wishes for the country, their own plans, then I'll start listening again. But just to hear two sides who I really think are so close, the difference between Bernie and Hillary is much less than is much more than the difference between Hillary and Trump. They're much closer in ideology, and always were. You get billionaires together in the same room. What do you think they're going to be interested in paying fewer taxes? You think they're going to be interested in not getting stock tips and all this stuff and working with the insiders? And has any of them come out for what I really want to see happen, and that's eliminating the tax deductions, the tax exemptions of churches, mosques, and synagogues? You can take the money you save on taxes, you start taxing them as businesses, which they are.
What about their property tax?
Oh, exactly. They used to own Yankee Stadium, for Christ's sake. They own half of New York. The property taxes, the business taxes on their little religious schools where they indoctrinate crazy people, and you put that money back into society, you can feed the hungry and educate the curious and not miss a beat. And you can take some rubbers and throw them into Africa, and you can prevent the spread of AIDS. And you can cook up a couple of missionaries for me every Tuesday just to cheer me up. So
I will say though there are some people some religious folks who do some good work. I know a lot of folks who do work like with Catholic charities, and they help everyone and anyone. They don't just help folks who are on the Catholic side. They help people who are truly in need. There are good folks out there. I just think that there's always good and bad wherever you go. I try to keep an open mind about it.
I certainly don't think the people, the worshipers, are the ones to blame. I think the hierarchy of organized religion has missed the boat. And
I think it's kind of like, I think a lot of times organized religion, no matter what religion it is, becomes like big business. They have something to protect.
Not only does it become big business, a wink and a nod from the pulpit politicizes an awful lot. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to, you can do it in such a way that they talk about it with keywords when they're having coffee and donuts in the basement of the church or the synagogue or the mosques, that contributes to the polarization of folks and doesn't bring us together. That's all. Whether you believe or not, you can believe at home. You can be a good person at home. You don't, and if you want to get together, you shouldn't deserve a tax break to get together. Why should we pay to build you a church? That kind of thing.
I think the problem is that that's so ingrained in the status quo, the way we do things here in this country, that I don't know how you change something like that. I think politically they have a lot of power.
What I call the unholy trinity of big business, government, and organized religion, they work hand in hand. You're not going to change the tax exemption law without government being compliant, and you got a system that really doesn't encourage the separation of church and state. Just simply doesn't. It's the way it is, and I don't know. I can't see too much hope. And I also can't see too much hope in the Middle East, where you have three major religions thinking that there's one spot, Jerusalem, that's mega important. And people are going to shed blood over religion. My God is better than your God, for God's sake.
Well, I think that's unfortunately gone back to biblical times, where you've got people who I think have forgotten the reason why they're even fighting with each other, but they just do it over and over again, and the guys who sell arms make all the money, and it's a cycle, one after the other after the other. but it's not just three major religions. You almost want to say it's kind of four, because you have the split in the Islamic world between the Sunni and the Shia, and they kill an awful lot of each other, to be quite honest. So it's kind of like a four-pronged approach, if you ask me.
Right. Well, you got to have a Jewish holiday, some people would say. But
I would say, yeah, I guess.
That's not even right.
And I think that's why I need baseball, because otherwise, if I didn't have that, I would lose my sanity with what's going on in this world.
Absolutely. And so let's get back to that. Close it out for us. We've had a great thing. Tell me something about baseball that you'd like to see if you were in charge, if you were the commissioner, something you'd do. The thing that irks you most about the current game is what?
The postseason. I love the playing game. I love the structure of the postseason right now. It's not as pure as it once was, but it's certainly, of the four major sports, the lower percentage of teams in baseball make it to the postseason. But what I would change is, can we have some day games? Can we play some games a little bit earlier? This generation there's a generation of kids who grew up who never saw the great Mariano Rivera pitch in a postseason game, because they were long fast asleep to get up for school the next day, because the game started at almost 9 o'clock. Baseball has got to start these games a little bit earlier. I understand during the season having more night games, it's revenue, but I mean, now we're starting to see the Saturday day game go away as well, and I think we need a little bit more of that. I mean, you see NBA basketball games in the playoffs; they're playing those during the day. You'll have a triple header where they'll play games during the day. Let's get some more day baseball. I think that
I would like that.
I think it's the right move. It doesn't have to be every game, but certainly every game in the World Series doesn't have to start at like 8:45, and the kids miss it. That's just my feeling about it. And the other thing is, let's speed up the games. I don't know how you do it. Maybe you do something like soccer does, where instead of going to commercial and stopping the progress, you put like a border around the screen where you can see an advertisement, but the game's still going on. Maybe that's the answer to get those games under 3 hours.
Good point. Also, it's kind of funny. Technology has given us the opportunity to finally get the call right as best we can. And we're a little bit away, because that rhythm. I'm a radio guy. I listen to games on radio more than anything, and it does break up the rhythm of a game. Ground ball to second, over the shore, double play, end of the inning, but we're going to wait a second, put on the headphones. Looks like a double play. I have to look at it from this angle, that angle. It's great. Get the call right, but
I agree.
Get it to the point where you're not thinking.
I go to about 20 to 25 games a year, and when you're sitting there watching the angles on the big screen, and they're seeing something different in Chelsea where they do the reviews, and so you're not understanding, like, why are they still looking at it where we've seen it and we already know what the rightful conclusion is. My feeling is that I love replay, but if you can't overturn the play in 30 seconds, then let's move on, and it's not conclusive at this point. We don't have to dissect it any further, because like what you said, it ruins the rhythm of the game, and the game has a lot of rhythm.
Right, and as you say, if it isn't conclusive in 30 seconds, then you shouldn't change it.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to be conclusive in 60 seconds if it's not conclusive in 30 seconds. And it does amaze me, too, that what we thought about umpires getting it right most of the time, there's a lot of stuff they miss and stuff you wonder about.
I feel like the replay is actually...
I'd also like to see the scheduling change, even though there's the playoffs, and I was a big, I'm an old school guy. You got 30 teams. You got to have more than 2 teams, 3 teams in
Absolutely.
the league going for it.
Or people lose interest.
Yes, absolutely. So if you've had all this expansion and you have all these playoffs, that's cool. But if the schedule is so unbalanced that you play, like the Giants play the Mets maybe 4 times in the year, and they're playing Washington 18 times, as an example, and I don't know what the exact numbers are, But
I think it's 19. I think you're darn close.
Yeah, that's not fair. That's not just because the way things are, the league may be stronger in the West than in the East or in the Midwest. You got to have a balanced schedule, and you got to you got to get back to 154 games. I think this is killing pitching. I think that's the major thing, is that rest at least once a week. You can get guys playing 15, 16, teams playing 15, 16 games in a row now. That's wrong for the game.
I agree, but I also think pitching has killed pitching. And what I mean by that is, in the old days, pitching was a marathon. You paced yourself to get through 9 innings. They asked Sandy Koufax, what do you consider a successful start when you shake the catcher's hand at the end of the game? And that doesn't exist anymore, because these guys are now trained to go all out for five and a third to 6 innings and throw over 95 miles an hour, because somebody said that over 94 miles an hour advantage pitcher, under 94 advantage hitter. And so they're doing something that physically isn't natural. I mean, the Nolan Ryans and the Roger Clemenses of the world who threw that hard, they were the anomalies. Now everyone seems to throw over 95, but they do it in such a short spurt, and that's where I think the injuries are occurring, because they're just pushing themselves to the limit, and they're not pacing themselves anymore.
And
personal opinion, of course.
You could say throwing a bunch of muscle mass onto tendons that aren't prepared for it in one way or another could be a detriment. And, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that's building muscle mass is using PEDs.
No, not at all. I agree.
Does mean, though, that the body, there are certain parts of the body that can't be built up, ligaments and tenement. And, you're pushing it there. All kinds of theories, though, and you gave yours, I gave mine. How about that? This has been terrific. I hope you...
Sounds like Mel Allen. How about that?
Pardon me?
I said, sounds like Mel Allen. How about that?
How about that? Yes. You're not old. You don't even remember Mel Allen in person.
I do, because he actually did the Yankee games in the early 80s on an old cable network called Sports Channel. The first cable Yankee games that were televised, he did them. They brought him back.
Oh, did not know that. I've been out here on this end of this coast. Did not realize that.
Matter of fact, if you want to get a copy of it,
Allen.
Matter of fact, if you want to get a copy of it, or just check it on YouTube, look for Dave Righetti's no-hitter on the 4th of July in 1983. Mel Allen broadcasted that game.
Whoa. I will look for that. Absolutely.
And do you know who made the final out?
No.
Of that no-hitter against the Red Sox in 1983 by Dave Righetti?
Let me guess. Yastrzemski.
No, but a Hall of Famer.
The Red Hall of Fame. Rice.
No. Wade Boggs.
Wade Boggs. Chicken-eating man. And allegedly, according to the oil can, Mr. Boyd, quite a racist was Wade Boggs. Just allegedly. I'm not going to try to back that up right offhand, but...
unless you can get Mr. Boyd on the show, and we can ask him.
I have made attempts to do that, and will continue those attempts, as a matter of fact. I have his number, and... some people like to come on, some people don't. Some people don't like to come on and really enjoy it. And that makes me happy when they do.
Well, I've got to say, I enjoyed it.
I'm glad you did, Mark, and I hope you'll come back, because you're fun to talk to for me.
Same here, Ralph. I appreciate it, and I definitely will come back if you invite me.
I certainly will down the line, and I'm going to implore you to keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your children out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses, and keep on keeping on, and all will be much better. Not perfect, but much better.
I think we could do that. Good enough.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, everybody. See you next week. Same time, same bat channel. Adios, amigos and amigas.